A 47-foot putt. For a moment, everything went silent. Hundreds of people stood around the green, phones raised, barely breathing as the ball rolled slowly across the grass. It curved slightly left, slowed near the edge, and then dropped straight into the hole. The crowd didn't just clap. They exploded. Because the person who just made that putt wasn't a professional golfer. It was Caitlin Clark, a basketball superstar, standing on a golf course, casually doing something that even elite golfers struggle to pull off. At first, people thought it was a lucky shot, a fun celebrity moment. But then the scorecards started circulating. The drives were long. The approach shots were precise. The putting was almost surgical. And suddenly the whispers started spreading around the course. This wasn't luck. Something else was happening. And the strangest part? The headlines barely scratched the surface of what actually went down that day. Because behind that one unbelievable putt was a story that most fans had never heard before. A story that completely changes how people see Caitlin Clark. But to understand why the golf world was so shocked, you have to go back to the moment she first stepped onto the course that morning, when everyone thought they were about to watch just another harmless celebrity appearance. They had no idea what was coming. That morning at the Pro-Am event hosted by Annika Sörenstam, the atmosphere felt exactly like people expected. Relaxed, casual, a little playful. Celebrity appearances at golf tournaments usually follow the same pattern. A famous athlete shows up, waves to the crowd, swings a few times, maybe hits one decent shot, and everyone politely applauds. It's more about entertainment than competition. So when Caitlin Clark walked onto the first tee, most spectators assumed they were about to see that same routine play out again. But something felt different. She didn't walk out smiling for cameras or soaking in the attention. Instead, she walked straight to her golf bag, pulled out a club, and quietly studied the fairway like she was already locked into a game plan. It was subtle, but the professionals nearby noticed it almost immediately. Her stance was balanced. Her grip looked natural. And before every swing, she paused for a second. The same calm breath each time, like someone repeating a routine they'd practiced thousands of times. That's not something people fake on the spot. Those are habits built over years. Standing nearby were two of the best golfers in the world. Players who spend their lives studying the smallest details of the game. One was world number 1 Nelly Korda, and the other was major champion Brooke Henderson. At first, they didn't say anything. But they were watching. Because what they were seeing didn't quite match the story everyone believed. By the third hole, the mood around the group had started to shift. The crowd wasn't chatting as much anymore. Phones were still out, but people had stopped scrolling and started paying closer attention. The shots were clean. Not flashy. Not lucky. Just controlled. Fairway after fairway. Green after green. And suddenly the quiet thought that nobody wanted to say out loud started spreading through the gallery. What if this wasn't just a basketball star trying golf? What if she was actually really good? And then came the swing that made the entire course. The moment that truly changed the mood came on a par 4 that most players approach cautiously. Hole 7 stretched out ahead of the group, about 347 yards. For most celebrity participants, the goal on a hole like this is simple. Keep the ball in play and avoid embarrassment. Nobody expects fireworks. But when Caitlin Clark stepped onto that tee box, something about her posture made a few people lean forward. She went through the same quiet routine she had used all morning. One practice swing. A deep breath. Eyes locked down the fairway. Then she swung. The sound alone made people turn their heads. If you've ever watched golf, you know that sound, the crisp, clean contact that tells you the ball was struck perfectly. The ball launched high into the sky, cutting straight down the center of the fairway. For a second, nobody said anything. They were just watching it travel. And travel. And travel. When the ball finally landed, it rolled out to around 337 yards, stopping only a few steps short of the green. Now the crowd reacted. Gasps spread across the gallery. A few people actually laughed in disbelief. Not because it was funny, but because it didn't make sense. The average driving distance on the LPGA Tour sits somewhere around 245 to 255 yards. What they had just witnessed was something entirely different. Standing nearby, Nelly Korda and Brooke Henderson looked down the fairway toward where the ball had stopped. That wasn't a lucky bounce. That was power, technique, timing. In other words, a real golf swing. Commentators covering the event quickly picked up on it too. One of them summed up what everyone else was thinking. "That's not impressive for a basketball player," he said. "That's impressive for anyone." And suddenly the round wasn't just a fun celebrity appearance anymore. People from other holes began drifting toward Clark's group, curious to see what the buzz was about. Word spreads quickly at golf tournaments, especially when something unusual is happening. By the time the group reached the back nine, the gallery had grown noticeably larger. People weren't just watching out of curiosity anymore. They were starting to wonder if they might witness something special. And then came the putt that nobody on that course will ever forget. By the time the group reached the back nine, the energy around the course had completely changed. People who had been following other players slowly started drifting over. Word had spread through the fairways the way it always does at live events, through whispers, text messages, and short phone clips already making their way online. Something unusual was happening, and everyone wanted to see it. When Caitlin Clark stepped onto the green for one of the holes on the back nine, she was left with a putt that most golfers don't even try to make. 47 feet. To put that into perspective, that's about the length of a small room. At that distance, professional golfers aren't thinking about sinking it. The goal is usually simple: get it close enough for an easy second putt. But Clark didn't rush. She walked around the line slowly, reading the slope of the green from multiple angles. Anyone watching closely could see the concentration on her face. The same calm focus people recognize from her moments on the basketball court. Finally, she stepped over the ball. The crowd had gone completely quiet. Even the players nearby paused to watch. She struck the putt. The ball rolled forward smoothly, starting slightly right before curving gently back toward the hole. It kept tracking, slowly losing speed as it approached the cup. For a second, it looked like it might stop just short. Then it tipped over the edge and dropped. The reaction wasn't just applause, it was pure disbelief. People shouted. Some fans threw their hands in the air. A wave of cheers rolled across the fairway as chants of "Let's go Caitlin" started spreading through the crowd. Nearby, Annika Sörenstam walked over, smiling and shaking her head. "You just made that look too easy," she reportedly told Clark. Even Nelly Korda couldn't hide her reaction, laughing as if her brain was still trying to process what she had just watched. Moments like that don't happen often in golf. Not even for professionals. But what surprised people even more wasn't just the putt itself. It was the realization that this performance didn't come out of nowhere. Because long before the cameras showed up, long before the golf world noticed, Caitlin Clark had, for most fans, the story of Caitlin Clark begins on a basketball court. They remember the deep three-pointers, the record-breaking college career, the sold-out arenas and the massive attention she brought to women's basketball. But very few people realize that long before those highlights, another sport had already become part of her life: golf. Growing up in Iowa, Clark didn't just spend her time in gyms and on basketball courts. Her father, Brant Clark, loved the game of golf and often brought the family to local courses on weekends. While most kids her age were sleeping in or watching cartoons, Clark was walking fairways early in the morning, carrying clubs and learning how to read greens. At first it looked like a simple family hobby. But people who knew the Clark family back then noticed something familiar about her approach. She didn't treat golf casually. She treated it like a challenge. If a shot didn't go where she wanted, she'd want to try it again. If she missed a putt, she'd spend extra time figuring out why. That same competitive mindset that would later define her basketball career was already showing up on those quiet courses. And in many ways, golf became the perfect mental training ground. Basketball moves fast. There are teammates, defenders, coaches shouting instructions, and a shot clock constantly ticking down. Golf is the opposite. It's just you, the ball, and your focus. Clark once explained that this is exactly what drew her to the game. There's nowhere to hide on a golf course. Every swing is a decision. Every mistake stays on the scorecard. For someone with her level of competitiveness, that kind of environment wasn't relaxing. It was addictive. Even during her record-breaking years at the University of Iowa, when her schedule was packed with practices, games, and national attention, she would still show up quietly at charity golf events. No big announcements. No social media hype. She'd just play around, talk with a few people, and leave. But occasionally, someone watching those rounds would notice something strange. Her swing didn't look like a celebrity swing. It looked trained. Smooth hip rotation. Balanced weight transfer. A follow-through that stayed perfectly online. The kind of mechanics golf instructors spend years teaching. One coach who watched her play during a charity event reportedly said he almost didn't recognize her at first. The swing simply didn't match the story. He expected a basketball star messing around on a golf course. What he saw looked like someone who had quietly put in thousands of reps. And that realization makes the performance at the Pro Am start to make a lot more sense. Because that incredible round, and that unforgettable 47-foot putt, didn't just happen in a single moment. It was the result of more than a decade of work that almost nobody was paying attention to. But once the round ended, the reactions from the biggest names in golf proved just how shocking it really was. Once the round ended, the reactions started pouring in, and they weren't the polite compliments you usually hear after a celebrity appearance. People in the golf world were genuinely stunned. One of the first voices to speak about it was Nelly Korda, who had watched nearly every shot up close that day. When reporters asked her about Clark's performance, she didn't hesitate. She said Clark's swing had real rhythm, real balance, the kind of mechanics that takes serious work to develop. In other words, it looked legitimate. Then came the reaction from Annika Sörenstam, whose event had just turned into one of the most talked about rounds of the year. Watching a basketball superstar casually produce shots like that left even a 10-time major champion shaking her head. But the surprise didn't stay on the course. Clips of the drive and the 47-foot putt started spreading across social media within hours. Sports pages, golf accounts, and basketball fans were all posting the same moment. And suddenly the conversation exploded. One of the biggest reactions came from Tiger Woods, who shared a message congratulating Clark and pointing out something interesting about elite athletes. Focus and competitive instincts, he said, often translate across sports. Coming from one of the greatest golfers in history, that kind of acknowledgement carries weight. Then the basketball world jumped into the conversation. Stephen Curry, who is known for being one of the best golfer athletes in the NBA, saw the clips and immediately chimed in online. He joked that Clark might have just earned an invitation to one of his charity golf tournaments. For fans, the idea of Curry and Clark teaming up on a golf course instantly went viral. Two of the most famous shooters in sports. One from the three-point line, the other suddenly from the fairway. But the reactions from celebrities and athletes weren't the most surprising part. What happened next caught the entire golf industry off guard. Because within just a couple of days, the impact of that one round started showing up in numbers. And those numbers told a story nobody expected. If you're enjoying this story so far, this is the kind of sports moment we break down all the time. Unexpected stories, hidden backgrounds, and the moments that change how fans see athletes. So if that's your thing, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next one. Because what happened after Clark's round wasn't just about one amazing performance. It triggered something people in golf had been trying to figure out for years. Within 48 hours, something unusual started happening. It wasn't another highlight clip or a new record. It was something far bigger and far more unexpected. The numbers around women's golf suddenly started jumping. Social media pages connected to the LPGA began gaining hundreds of thousands of new followers almost overnight. Videos from the event were being replayed again and again. Clips of that drive and the 47-foot putt were circulating everywhere, from sports networks to casual fan accounts. And when analysts started digging into the audience data, they noticed a pattern. A huge portion of the new viewers weren't traditional golf fans. They were younger viewers, basketball fans, and a massive wave of women who admitted they had never watched golf before. All because of one person, Caitlin Clark. Comments across social media told the same story. One fan wrote, "I only clicked the video because Caitlin Clark was playing, and now I'm watching golf highlights." Another said, I never thought I'd care about golf, but this was actually fun to watch. For years, golf organizations had been trying to attract a younger audience. Marketing campaigns, social media pushes, celebrity events, everything designed to bring new attention to the sport. But sometimes change happens in a way nobody plans. One athlete shows up. One moment goes viral. And suddenly millions of people are paying attention. Sports analysts have started calling this phenomenon the Caitlin Clark effect. They first noticed it in basketball. During her college career, arenas were selling out across the country whenever she played. Television ratings for women's basketball jumped dramatically. Merchandise sales skyrocketed. Now the same ripple seemed to be happening in another sport entirely. Golf insiders were openly admitting they had never seen an event generate this kind of crossover interest so quickly. Because stars bring attention to themselves. But occasionally, an athlete becomes something more than a star. They become a cultural force. And after that unbelievable round at the Pro Am, many people started asking a question that sounded crazy at first, but suddenly didn't feel impossible anymore. What if Caitlin Clark actually took golf seriously? Not just as a hobby, but as another sport she could dominate. Because when you look closely at what happened that day, the numbers are surprising. And they lead to one question that's still being debated across the sports world. That question started popping up everywhere after the scorecard from that round became public. Could Caitlin Clark actually compete in professional golf? At first it sounded like one of those internet debates that fans love to throw around just for fun. But when analysts started looking at the numbers from her round, the conversation got a lot more serious. Her score that day was 61. Even in a Pro Am setting, that's an eye-catching number. On the LPGA Tour, the average round in many tournaments usually falls somewhere around 70 or 71. Clark's score was far below that. Then there was the power. That 337-yard drive on hole 7 didn't just impress the crowd. It placed her distance in a range that many professional golfers work years to reach consistently. And the putting. That 47-foot putt wasn't just about luck. Long putts like that require reading subtle slopes, controlling speed perfectly, and committing to the line under pressure. It's the type of skill golfers spend thousands of hours trying to master. When swing coaches later reviewed clips from the round, several of them pointed out something that surprised viewers even more. Her mechanics looked professional. Balanced stance. Clean rotation through the hips. A controlled follow-through that stayed right on target. One coach even said that if Clark ever decided to dedicate serious off-season training to golf, it wouldn't be unrealistic for her to eventually qualify for certain professional events. Now, does that mean she's about to leave basketball behind and chase a golf career? Probably not. Clark is still in the prime of a basketball journey that has already changed the landscape of the sport. But the idea that she could succeed in another professional arena says something powerful about the level of athleticism she brings to everything she does. And behind the scenes, another interesting possibility has started to surface. Several reports suggest that major golf equipment companies have quietly reached out about potential partnerships. If those deals ever happen, Clark could become one of the very first athletes to hold major endorsement relationships connected to both professional basketball and professional golf. That's a level of crossover influence almost no athlete has reached. And it all traces back to one round, one unexpected performance, and one putt that rolled across a green while an entire crowd held its breath. Because that moment didn't just shock the golf world. It reminded people of something bigger. Greatness doesn't always stay in one lane. Sometimes it shows up where nobody expects it.